What's up, guys? Margiela here, and today is a very special episode. I'm with my cousin from BC. Welcome to Cuaderno, Ate Kiki.
Hello.
I'm so happy that she joined me, and I know she's gonna talk about and share a lot of her experiences and her wisdom. So today we're gonna talk about growth, blooming where you are planted. But before we start, I just wanna ask Ate Kiki to tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Katrina. I'm Jilla's cousin. I'm originally from the Philippines and I moved to Canada in Vancouver 3 years ago. So I do know a thing or two about trying to pursue things about growth and trying to cultivate it. So it should be an interesting conversation.
Yes, I'm so happy she's joined me, and I really look up to you, Ate Kiki, for really always trying something new. Like, I've seen you travel from place to place and even starting to build your own home in Canada, where your second home, right? And it's amazing how you've come for a long way with that. So, diba? Strong, independent woman.
That's true.
And
The new generation.
yes, and it's growth. It's something scary, but you overcome. But my first question is, Ate KK, what is growth for you? Ayun.
I think, not to sound cliche, but growth is a mindset. Growth is something that you try to pursue, and it's not singular. It's something that comes across the board. Sometimes the expressions of growth that you had when you were in your teenage years or when you were in university years are different from what you eventually lean into or learn into when you become an adult. So it's a form of mindset, and the beauty and the tragedy behind that is that it's subject to change, right? But it's just a matter of perspective. So yeah, for me, that's the start of growth.
Exactly. I know I've read a book. Probably I read the book Grit, and Carol Dweck is one of the psychologists, and I love how she, like with our words, she was able to say the difference between never and yet. And that's basically what growth mindset is, not saying that it's over yet, just, I think for me, growth is also about patience and taking your time, diba? And it's not always upwards. Sometimes you have to step back, or maybe you have to hit rock bottom to reach the top. And I think that is what happened to me personally. I came into nursing, as a shy kid, and I'm not as
Yeah.
bubbly as this. I'm so different from this. I can't even talk to people. But ever since I failed, I had to push myself to overcome that rock and to climb up in order to reach my dreams. So, yun. So, but it's outside your comfort zone, challenging yourself. What else can
No,
you say?
it's interesting that you said that you've understood growth more from an experience of failure, because I was smiling throughout that when you were saying it, because I know how it feels as well. I've had my fair share of failures from someone who's not necessarily an achiever all her life, but someone who took on the straight path, the conventional path.
Yeah.
To experience failure is such a heartbreaking thing, and although it's painful, it also is a platform for you to test on whether or not the truths that you formerly believed in, do they really align with you. So another aspect of growth is actually, it's sort of it's a combination between a test for courage, vulnerability, faith, and honesty. It's always a mix of those four core values, and you see that across the span when you're pursuing things, because it's always scary to go through things that cultivate growth. It's wonderful once you've reached it, but the process behind it is incredibly difficult and uncomfortable as well.
Yeah, you have to really do it afraid, with uncertainties around you,
Mm-hmm.
without, you just have to keep going,
Mm-hmm.
even though at times you don't see yourself progress through certain situations. You just have to keep trying, and I think that's what's important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I agree, Ate. Like, I think for me, I would say that I was always on top of the class, and it humbled me.
Mm-hmm.
Failure humbled me. So it really, I don't know what to say. It's like, it's such a, you can't predict growth. If you're gonna have like a graph, it's gonna be like,
Exactly.
right?
Mm,
Right?
exactly. And I think growth has always been romanticized
Mm-hmm.
in the profession, in the books. When you're a child, like, oh, you're gonna grow from the ugly duckling to the beautiful swan, or you're gonna grow from a small mustard seed into this big tree. But they don't actually express that the growing process, that there are growing pains within it.
Yes.
And there are points in your life where you no longer recognize facets of yourself, like you were saying, that you were this kid who was always quiet, and that you always pursued things in the correct order, and you wanted to do well in school. Your intention was good, but the process behind that growth, and the circumstances to challenge that it's not just a skill to be learned, it's a mindset. It's a test of your values as well. Like, do you really believe
Absolutely.
in that? um, maybe all this time you thought that, oh, I think I'm empathic enough, I think I'm humble enough, but then the pursuit towards growth sort of smacks you in the face, and then it teaches you at face value that, oh, maybe you're not what you think you are
Mm-hmm.
really. And then
Yeah.
it's a I always say that growth is a mirror. Are you happy with what you're seeing, or are you really what you're seeing as well? Because sometimes when we look in front of the mirror, we see facets of ourselves, but the question is, do we recognize them? Do we identify with them?
That's so beautiful. I don't know what else to add for that. That's beautiful, Ate. Looking at your life though, like,
Mhm.
think of the time where you felt the most growth.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I think um, there's not a singular component where I felt that there was an incredible amount of growth, but it was always a series of pursuits that led to it. So, but one of the, I think one of the most distinct parts where I felt that I was growing as an individual was actually moving here,
Mm-hmm.
because literally I moved to a place where I didn't know anyone. Like, you guys are in Manitoba, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but I moved to BC. And I've always been that kid who was idealistic, to the point where sometimes I was a dreamer. And sometimes it's not necessarily healthy to be a dreamer when you have the reality of life. But the biggest growth project for me was actually moving here to a place where you literally pack your entire life in two suitcases, show up, and like hope to God that it works.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds great. It sounds
Mm-hmm.
um, wonderful now that, oh, she did that. But in retrospect, I'm always telling my friends this, and the people close to me, like, in retrospect, it's crazy that I did it. Like, I'm fortunate enough that I put up the work, and I've met wonderful people who helped me to be where I am today. But that was one big thing, that where I felt that, oh, I really am growing up, because I've had to accept certain things, and I had to do certain things that weren't necessarily what I expected. But if you ask me if I do it all over again, like, I would, like, without a doubt.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a one point, one stop destination, and it's something
Exactly.
continuous. And
Mm-hmm.
every day there's always something in store for you. Um, and so, like, is it different though? Like, because I know you travel a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
it's different. Is it different from traveling? You know, would you say settling is different from traveling like
Yeah,
that? Or...
it's interesting that you said that because um, they're definitely they have similarities, but they're so different in certain ways. Like as you said, it's different when you settle, but it's because when you travel, you're just visiting a place,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the possibility like, oh, if it doesn't work, then I'll go to this country. Then oh, if it doesn't work, um, I can explore this next town. But moving to a certain country, um, and finding pursuits to call it home, it's a wild story altogether. I remember my good friend telling me, well, it's gonna be difficult, Katrina, because you're technically uprooted from where you've been all your life. And I was skeptical. I listened to her and I said, oh yeah, it's going to be difficult. I know the logistics of it, finding a job, finding new friends, navigating the entire system of the government and blah, blah, blah. But I really didn't understand back then what she meant by uprooted. It was probably later into my first year where I slowly understood what she meant. When I got to travel again to a different country, people would ask me like, oh, where are you from? And for a moment I would freeze. I would say, um, well, technically I'm originally from the Philippines, but I live in Canada. So, and then they would say if I would go, and I wanted to shorten that, and I would say like, oh, I'm from Canada. And then they would say like, oh, so you have family there. And I'm like, technically my family is in the Philippines. So it was messy. It was jumbled all together. So I understood at that point that, oh, do I identify with this part of my identity? I felt like moving here, the pursuit of growth, yes, it fulfilled me, but I felt like I was also robbed of certain aspects of my identity, which I once found truth in. So it forced me to actually think like, what were my truths? What were the things that I valued? And what were the things that mattered? And those things, like e- like those things actually help center me whenever I pursue things that scare me. At the same time, I always say that the bigger the dream or the bigger the opportunity, the bigger the demand for a certain level of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. There's certainly sacrifices with that pursuit of growth, and it it's so dynamic that in a way that your character, you know, as a person,
Mm-hmm.
it just changes. It just shapes you into,
Mm-hmm.
you know, into someone that I hope that you're meant to be. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
someone that you want to be and you're meant to be to make the world better.
Yeah.
Diba? So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something beautiful about growth too. If you're choosing to improve and grow, you're making other people, maybe inspire them to grow as well. Like, oh, if she's doing it, and so can I. You know, like kind of like
Mm-hmm.
that. It's like I feel like after this quarantine, it's like, you know, everyone's just interconnected, and every choice you have can affect other people too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's good that you're saying like every choice you make affects other people, because we all know that. But
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I remember about pursuing growth is sometimes people don't share the same mindset that
Mm-hmm.
you have about growth. Like you,
Mm-hmm.
for example, a funny story is when I moved here, or when I was processing the things in order to move here, I only limited it to a very small circle. Not even everyone in my family knew that I had my papers ready and I had stuff ready.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I had my my medical, it was only my older brother who knew that I was going to do
I
it.
kind of remember
Yeah,
that.
and when I got my visa, my mom was like, "Oh, that's a student visa, right?" And I said,
Mm-hmm.
"No, it's for permanent residency. I'm moving for good." And she was like, "You're crazy." I remember my dad talking to me in the car, and he said jokingly, but I know it had meaning and it had a sense of worry to it. He said, "You know what? Your mom talked to me, and she said, talk to your daughter. Does she know what she's doing with her life? Like it's not a joke moving to a different country." And I knew that they came from a good place, but when you're pursuing things that challenge you to grow, not everyone will share that with you, even the people that you hold most dear to your heart. And
Exactly.
don't take offense on that. There are some things that you have to pursue on your own, and then later on invite people to come in. You have to cultivate the seeds, or you have to take care of the pursuits towards growth before showing it to the world. Somehow, I always say, like, it's not about being selfish. It's about protecting the purity behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you come into things, you're excited, you're ecstatic. Sometimes you have this blind joy and blind sense of courage and braveness um, to pursue these things. And then it takes only one person to say, like, why are you going to do that? Like, that's not really possible. And it's good if you've reached a point in your life where you're brazen enough not to be countered by these things. But most of the time, we're not there yet. That's why we're cultivating growth. We're trying to build the foundations towards courage, towards being brave. Sometimes these people mean well, but they actually project their fears to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it stops you from progressing further towards growth. I remember in university, I was always that individual who loved novels and who loved reading things about, oh, she moved to Paris and tried to live her life. Um, we were on a break, and then briefly, my classmate and I said, we discussed the book, and I said, like, oh, I'd want to do that. I would want to move to a different country and live by myself and see how it goes. And he was lovely, but he said, but you do know that it's going to be hard, Katrina. You won't be comfortable with the discomfort that it brings. I, I, I listened to what he said, and they said, oh, yeah, I really didn't factor in the discomfort and the growing pains that came along with moving to a different country. But why not? If Western people can do it, why can't I? If men can do it, why can't I?
Mm-hmm.
If people in the 1920s did it, our national hero did it, he moved to Europe, um, why can't I? Why am I being limited by the fears of other people around me? So it's something important to remember that I know we get excited about, like, hey, I'm doing this, like, check it out soon. But be cautious to protect your pursuits towards growth, because at the end of the day, you're the main character in your story, and you want to cultivate that character as much.
Mm-hmm. I think it also goes into being self-aware and knowing really what matters most for you, like your values,
Mm-hmm.
being being like knowing who you are and what you value, what are your what are you after, or your dreams and your goals. And yeah, I think it's being true to yourself too.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And I will go into our next question. So, if we're having constant growth, there's also that part or moment where we have those plateaus. So, how will you navigate through those plateaus? Like, imagine, like, just, like even weight loss. People lose fast, like they're big and they lose fast. And there's comes to a certain point where it's harder to lose weight, or when you lift more weights it just gets easier. Like, how would you overcome that plateau?
I'm definitely guilty of those plateaus, because I would start one thing and then I would stop it. And the sustainability aspect of it is definitely challenging for me, and I'm still struggling with that. Um, but one thing is, again, you go back to your truth. Why are you pursuing those things?
Mm-hmm.
What motivates you? What's the volition behind it? Um, for me, one thing that I always go back to, and something that helps me mentor, is that you go back to your truth and find different expressions to it. I was actually listening to a neuroscience podcast, and he was saying, like, we all have our passions, but the expressions of those passions take on a different form.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very interesting perspective because, for example, you're passionate about learning and you tried to um, learn online. You did it, but then you weren't able to sustain it. You go back to your truth that yes, I love learning, but maybe online work isn't really working for me. Maybe I'm about to learn by listening to other people and listening to their experiences. You were saying that, for example, if a person was trying to exercise and they weren't really progressing or they stopped um, pursuing that, maybe you have to go back to your truth. Are you really exercising for the goal of losing weight, or are you exercising for the goal of trying to be healthy? And sometimes maybe exercise is just a singular thing. Maybe before doing the physicalities of it, you have to work on the mental aspect of it. Because why are you not motivated? It's all going back to the truth and finding different streams of expression of it. um, During COVID is a good example because we were all limited with what we knew was our normal, and not everyone. We were all in the same boat, but the expressions of that boat was different. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just a matter of going back to your truth and exploring different forms of expressions through it.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna say to be self-aware, you know,
Mm-hmm.
of oh, okay, I'm reaching this plateau. I have to find new things and new ways to inspire myself and remind myself of why I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And you have to
Um,
be honest with yourself.
mm-hmm.
Sometimes you can have self-awareness, but you're not ready to face it, or you're not ready to act on it. I'm definitely guilty of that. I would say,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I'm reaching a funk again. I would tell that to my friend, and my friend said, okay, so it's that time of the year, what are you going to do about it? And I said, I need another month, and then I'll pursue it. So sometimes it's good. It's a number of things. It's it's something that you have to know your truth. You have to be self-aware, and at the same time, you have to surround yourself with people who help hold you accountable for it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think for now, like even I have this creativity challenge that I have with my three friends, and we're doing. I think we've been doing it for a month now, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just amazing to have that kind of group support and people just cheer you on to keep going. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
you share the same minds, and it's so important to really find your tribe when you
Mm-hmm.
pursue something. Um, I was gonna say something with growth, navigating through the plateaus. I think it's really important to really be consistent in doing what you really want to be good at, or like not necessarily good at. I think I'm gonna transition now into how would you know the difference between being between perfectionism and growth? That's my other
Mm.
second question.
I'm still trying to figure that one out
Right?
because
Right? It's
I'm
hard.
I'm extremely guilty of postponing things because they're not perfect or they're not in the right form still. Are you familiar with Brene Brown?
Yeah, I read one of her books and I love.
Okay, yeah, I've actually just finished one of her book. It's
Is it?
called The Gifts of Imperfection. You're familiar with it,
Oh.
right? And in her, I'm plugging her website. um, and in her book, she actually had something called the Wholehearted Inventory. You can go to her website and you can take the test and it shows you, it has a series of questions, and it shows you a few things that you need to let go of and what you need to cultivate instead. And one of those things is perfectionism and self-compassion. So it's just something. Anyways, I skewed a bit. You were saying about growth and perfectionism.
Mhm.
Perfectionism, I think, the word says so itself. There's a standard, there's a level of expectation to it, um, that things need to be at a certain form. Whereas growth, um, it's not singular. It's subject to form. I think growth is just more expansive, and it's more tolerant of the it's more tolerant of the mess, I guess. It's more tolerant of the imperfections behind it. I think,
Mhm.
with, for example, a good example would be, oh, I want to pursue writing, or I want to be a nurse by this age. Perfectionism would be, I have to be a nurse by the age of 22. I have to have completed my bachelor's. I had to be in acute by this time. Growth is, my goal is to work in healthcare and to actually care for people. Like, the end goal would be to be a nurse, but the you're exploring options to it in just in the case that you're not there yet. Like, um, obstacles won't limit you, whereas perfectionism sometimes cultivates anxieties even more because you expect a certain level of standard instead of pursuing things that cultivate skill and character.
Mhm. I was gonna say perfectionism is more stagnant. It seems
Mm-hmm.
like you're growing, you know, it seems like it, but it is a facade. I feel like perfectionism is, you know, when they say practice makes perfect, I would say practice makes progress, and growth
Mm-hmm.
acknowledges that progress, whereas
Mm-hmm.
perfectionism is more like, so you just cut it off, you're just there, you're
Mm-hmm.
stagnant, you know, like I
Mm-hmm.
think that is one of the things that I could see the difference between the two. And I was reflecting and I was like, to be perfect means to prove for others, to grow means to pursue things for yourself, to help
Mm-hmm.
others at your own pace. That's just for me though.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredibly lovely. Yeah.
So, yeah. So I guess for the fifth question, how will you bloom where you are planted? Especially right now where we're in darkness and it's so
Mm-hmm.
hard, right? Like I know you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
this a while ago. I was gonna go to that trend. I was gonna go to that, but I was like, I decided I'll just have this last question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How will you bloom where you're planted? Especially right now, we're in quarantine. It feels like opportunities are closed off, and it's so hard.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's a challenging question because not everyone. It's I guess it's unique to everyone on if you think about it. You can't dictate growth on an individual. Like, this works for me, something might be different for you. But I always go back to um, go back to your truth, because at the end of the day, the world can rob you of the external facets of it, but it's think of it as a toolbox. Like, what are the things that you value? I value creativity, I value family, I value pursuits that bring me growth and character and individuality. So if you know your truth, it's just a matter of wrapping your head around the things that limit you from pursuing them. So one of the things where you can bloom where you're planted is, I always say, is go after the things that make you feel alive, or go after the things that bring you meaning. Um, as an OT, it's a big thing in our profession to make sure that the activities or the tasks that we're providing for the individual has meaning. So I was thinking about it. I was thinking about our conversation. Um, and I think one of the foremost things that people forget or they're having a difficulty with growing up is they will always, you'd hear people say, like, well, I'm stagnant, I'm not growing anymore, or I'm not becoming who I want to be. It's because they no longer identify with the person that they're becoming. Maybe because they were listening to the external facets of it. They were pressured by society and they forgot their truths and it got muddled in the process. We hear about people having all of these things. They're having a good job, they're secured for their life, but they're not happy or they're not fulfilled. It's because they no longer identify with those truths that, or they never even identified with those truths that they ended up pursuing. So, in order to cultivate growth on, on a place where everything seems unfamiliar and everything seems dire, pursue things that bring meaning to you. It doesn't mean that it has to be absolute. It's the little things that you do every single day. If writing is important, if expression is important, write not for other people, but for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Keep those writings, and you'll be surprised that, oh, I did that. And I work in long term care, um, where unfortunately people live there till the end of their life. You always hear it that, oh, I wish I did this. I wish I did that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always going back to your truth. It's always going back to the things that are meaningful to you. Um, I always tell my friends and the people that I love that I wish we would never reach that point where we sit in a room and say, I wish I did this, because it spuns a whole different aspect of you. It changes you for not necessarily for the better, but it changes you for the worse. Some people become miserable because they forgot their truth or they forgot to listen to what was meaningful to them, and then they ended up pursuing. So in order for you to bloom, you have to cultivate the person that you want to be, even if the people around you, or even if society deems it as unfit for that time being.
It kind of reminds me of Mulan.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? Right? It's like finding your inner voice and being true to your heart. True to your
yeah,
heart.
yeah. Mushu.
Yeah, right.
I've never watched the
I
new
haven't
one,
either.
so
And
they said that it's different.
yeah, I love the Disney movie though, like the
Mm-hmm.
original movie. But yeah, it's finding your inner action. Okay. So if you guys are gonna ask me how will you bloom where you are planted, I'm gonna say to it's all perspective. Actually, I feel like in terms of content creating, I grew more than I've never been ever been before. Because like there's some opportunities there. I've always been into traveling and making that
Mm-hmm.
adventures, but you know what? Like this quarantine or COVID really pushed me to really just think of content that will really help people. Something that
Mm-hmm.
I could do at home. Something I
Mm-hmm.
could talk about, and I feel like I grew more than I did before. I was more consistent with creating videos or writing poems or creating
Mm-hmm.
questions for podcasts or structuring programs and all that um, with this. And I think it is a matter of perspective
Mm-hmm.
and seizing the opportunities and maybe even making those opportunities for yourself and to really chase after them and fulfill whatever's in front of you to make the most of what you have right now you know
Yeah.
with everything around us right now. I feel like there's so much restrictions, and I think you become resourceful at this
Mm.
at this time, diba? And
Yeah.
diba, what are you gonna add at it?
I feel like people have been more creative, and they're not afraid to put themselves out there more. Like I can't speak for you, but I've known you well enough that you're an introvert.
Yes, I
And
am.
and I'm an introvert as well. And for someone who's introverted, it's always incredibly daunting to put yourself out there, or to seek pursuits of expression that you're comfortable with. Because for us, being introverted and being overthinkers, we're already 10 steps ahead, like, oh God, what do I say? Should I say a bit? Should I respond? Um, and with this pandemic, you've done incredibly well with your podcasts and with your videos, and I think you stayed true to your core as well, to the things that you value. You've
Oh,
always wanted to help people, but at the same time, it's so easy to be influenced by what people say around you,
definitely.
or to get caught along the tide. But you've done an incredible job of balancing to staying to or to pursuing the things that are truthful to you, or the things that you value, which is to help people and to find ways of creativity. But at the same time, you maintain the fact that you're still introverted, that you still appreciate your own space, that you still um, value that you have control over your platforms and of your content. So you've done a good job with that one.
Thank you, Ate. I appreciate that. You're making me cry. But yes, actually, it doesn't seem like I'm an introvert because maybe at work or
Mm-hmm.
or in vlogs, like wala akong hiya, makapal yung mukha ko. But I don't like being in the spotlight, and that's
Mm-hmm.
something that I struggle with every single day. Every single day, na when I put myself out there, I don't like being noticed. I like working
Mm-hmm.
behind the scenes, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm more on the introvert side, but I could do switch to extrovert, maybe
Extrovert.
ambivert. But like
Mm-hmm.
more on introvert, I would say, and I really love my space alone.
Yeah.
That's where you create in solitude.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
so many ideas happen when you're alone. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
that bad to be alone, guys, especially when you enjoy your own company. That's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. Like when you love yourself, I think, and you love your company, then it's not bad to be alone. There's a difference between being alone and lonely, but that's another topic.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
So we're gonna go into the next part of. I asked people like what their questions are. I hope you can hear this, Ate, but this is one question from my friend.
Hey Quaderno, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
It's 10 years from now. I'm 28. So, oh my
She
God.
doesn't look like 28.
I'm 28. So, I went to university at 16, 17, 18. So, I was third year in university.
That's so young, guys, no?
That's quite young compared to here in Canada. Um, yeah, I'm just making sure because I went to a 5-year program, so I graduated by when I was 21. So I was oh my God, it's 10 years ago. um, 18. How do you want to get started, or do you want me to start?
Sure, I could start. When I was 18, I had struggles with self love, and I always criticized myself. I would say that I was a perfectionist, and I always crave, like I put my worth in achieving things, like top of the class, and put my self worth in my grades. And if I were gonna say to my 18-year-old self, girl, love yourself. Your worth is not found in anything else but God. So that's the thing for me, and it changed me. And you know what? Like ever since I made that decision to love myself, to see how God sees me, it changed the way I interact with people, changed my relationships more so with myself, because people say, you know, like people would forget that we talk to ourselves and we're not aware about what we say to ourselves. You know, we're too self-critical sometimes, maybe most of the time we're not aware. So I think that change and that decision to really love myself and to see myself as God's child, and that I'm capable, that I'm worthy no matter what I do, that really set the tone to my transformation to who I am right now. And it took time. I had self-esteem issues when I was 9 years old because I got bullied for how many years, and it was a struggle. Transformation isn't overnight. So it's like, I think for me it was 12 years, and I have to work at it like hard. Like I had to go to therapy, I have to do these programs, and had to, you know, nourish my soul with his word, and it took time. So that's what I was gonna say for the first question. How about you, Ate?
To me, like, it's totally opposite. When I was 18, I felt like I've always been the kind of person who sort of knew and sort of always craved to build character. So I sort of had an idea on what kind of person I wanted to be, to the point that I felt entitled that, oh, I had my things together by this age, I have to be this and that. Subsequently, I didn't give the people around me room enough to make mistakes. Like, I saw things black and white. And I would even say, like, I was pretty judgmental, and I had, like you, I was a perfectionist, but my perfectionism translated not only to myself, but to the people around me or the people that I tried to interact with. So I guess my advice for my 18-year-old self is to make room, or to make space and to make room for mistakes, and to recognize people beyond their identities, but the person behind that. Because more often than not, it'll carry over as you grow older, like to your parents, to your family, to your friends, to your coworkers. We would always say, like, oh God, why is she this kind of person? Or she's just terrible. But then sometimes you don't know the stories behind these people. So that's why I would always tell myself, and even up to now, I always try to, when I catch myself trying to judge others or trying to jump in and being reactive to a situation, I would always step back and say, like, hey, create space, make room. You don't know this person's story, or you don't know what this person's day is like. So make room, or create space for their stories to be heard sometimes, but don't allow yourself to be pushed over by it. Listen and try to understand, but at the same time, try to recognize the room around you. If like this person is going through something, just try to become more human. I think, unfortunately, we live in an age where there's such big emphasis on efficiency that we forget the humanity aspect of it.
We are humans, and if I do make a mistake, that's actually a statement that I tell myself, you know, like I'm human, but what am I gonna do about it? That, I think that's a good approach to improving, or to moving towards growth, is to acknowledging that you have a mistake, and then finding out ways to, or an action to solve that problem or whatever. Growth is humbling, and
It is
enriching
extremely humbling.
Enriching at the same time. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, it's wonderful.
It is, because it's extremely humbling, because I think when I was 18, I had such high standards for myself, and I was unconsciously projecting them towards other people.
Right?
So for me, they shouldn't have room for mistakes because I was barely holding it all together. I tried my best. Why can't you? So I had expectations for them. And I didn't realize back then, it took me to fail big time in my life, unfortunately, to realize that, oh, I was being unfair to the people around me. So I actually wrote something. I said, and I found it in my old journals, and I said, like, the outcomes of growth may not be what you have envisioned. The essential part is the work towards it, the character and perceptions that you build. So I think it built a lot of character, now, looking back and then, that maybe it's important to acknowledge your mistakes then and now, because that's also one thing that hinders you from pursuing growth for that one.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Okay. So my friend's second question was,
If you can change anything about the way that you were brought up, what would you change?
Mhm.
Do you want to go first?
I can go first, Ate.
Yeah.
So, okay, so
Sure.
for me, when I listened to this question, I felt like when I was a kid, I was just so, I had these four walls around me and I'm just in my home. It's so, I was constricted, like very restricted to go out, to explore, and I didn't have that much opportunity to learn more about the world around me. I didn't know, I like, legit, Ate, like I thought Philippines was just a country. Like even though look, the internet wasn't famous back then. I mean, like it wasn't present back then. So like for some reason, I didn't think that there's other people as like different race or like it was very. I was kind of close to the like just at home. Like no, I didn't really go out there to maybe climb a mountain. I would just go to the mall and stuff. I hope my parents were able to provide me or show me the importance of trying new things or like experience things and learn from them, not just work. I mean, just study and then just at home, study home. So I think that's the flexibility and like I think yung pagiging overprotective,
Yeah.
it kind of hit a toll on me. But you know what? Like everything has a reason, and I wouldn't change it for anything because I am what I am right now because of what happened in the past. So I have no regrets, and I told it, Mom and Dad, I love you. Ayun. Baka
They should have.
magka-controversy tayo.
No, they should have sent you over to our place
Yeah.
for the summers, right?
Right? Yeah. So they kasi homebody sila super
Yeah,
and
yeah.
parang iba yung pero it
Mind.
changed. Oh, iba yung
Yeah.
mindset eh. So,
Yeah.
mm-mm.
It's interesting that you said that, because initially when the question came to me, I was like, oh, I didn't really want to change anything for my parents, because I'm quite fortunate enough to have, they're not the perfect parents,
Of course.
but they were good parents in a sense that they were such a great team. They're both different personalities. My dad is someone who's more conservative when it comes to approaching things, but he has such a good work ethic, that it cultivated discipline, hard work. But my mom, at the same time, she's such a visionary. She always explores things. That's why I think she always tries things, or she always educates herself. So they were such a good team.
Good
And
balance, ate, too.
there's such a good balance, actually. And then they would challenge each other. For example, my dad would say to my mom, like, oh, you're spoiling the kids too much. You're allowing them. And my mom said, I'm not spoiling them. I'm just giving them options so that they're aware of what's available around them. Your job is to teach them the skills or the values that make them to be better people. So I was quite fortunate to have the opportunity to be educated well, not just in school, not just in an institution, but in life in general. We
Right?
were exposed to, we don't get me wrong, we were not well off. We're not well off, but we were exposed to multiple experiences. Okay. So if I were not necessarily change, but something just to add on to how my parents raised us well growing up, it's something that I hope that they tried to express themselves more in terms of how they felt. But I do understand where they're coming from, because as parents, you feel responsible to protect your child. But it was always an interesting, they weren't touchy, they weren't expressive. So but now they are. The older and the farther away I am, they seem to be.
Oh.
So it's
Oh.
I'm a bit awkward though, like because
Oh.
I grew up without it. So now I'm a person who's always compartmentalized and boxed her feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm okay with receiving it, but to express it, I feel incredibly awkward. So it's just
Oh.
some minor things, but I've been fortunate enough to have parents who are quite awesome in cultivating education and growth.
Oh, I really know that they are really proud of you, and you've grown as a lovely woman that you are. And it's okay. It's okay. You know, it takes time, and then
Mm-hmm.
ultimately you'll be comfortable
Mm-hmm.
expressing your love then, and
Mm-hmm.
it's there. Expressing love is it's in various forms, and it,
Exactly.
diba? So it's not necessarily this kind of thing, and everyone has a different love languages. So,
Mm-hmm.
but in time, ate,
Yeah, and I
that's
write
cute.
them letters though. I do write them letters.
See? Yes.
So it's that's how I express it.
Yes, so that's wonderful. I think we're going to the end, towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if this is my last question for you, Ate, if you have one word, or some people have a hard time actually with this question,
Yeah.
with our epilogue. If you have one word, or kung gusto mo, one sentence that you can take away from today's convo, what would it
Mm-hmm.
be?
Mm. Can you go ahead? I'm curious to hear
Sure.
yours.
um I'm always that person. Oh, that's not even like
No,
one
I know
word.
it's so hard.
It's hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, based on what you said, Ate, I really appreciate truth. I
Mm-hmm.
would say truth, because every, like nowadays, it's so hard to find your truth, or the truth.
Mm-hmm.
People, like in social media, it's always a facade. It's not always real, and
Mm-hmm.
for you to have truth, to find your truth, that really stuck with me when you shared your experience and your insight.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hold on to that truth and follow through growth. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why we're cousins, because my the thing that I took on as well is it's similar. Like you know what you value, and know who you value, and
Mm-hmm.
know why you value them.
Mm-hmm.
And it all goes back to your truth, and um, entitle yourself to understand it. Give yourself time, because it's not like it's gonna show up in your front door and then there's just a light bulb moment on a singular day. You've kept on saying that um, growth humbles you, and I think that's what people often forget. It's a very, very humbling process.
Mm-hmm.
So know your truth and be open to alternate forms of humility.
Mm-hmm.
There's a, if you happen to visit Victoria, the Parliament building,
Mm-hmm.
there's a beautiful Latin phrase there. It's 3 words, and it struck me. It's sine splendor ukasu. Sine splendor ukasu means beauty without diminishment.
Oh.
So it's similar to growth. It's not always beautiful, but it's always subject to the individual's eye. and always stick to your truth, so that the person that you're becoming, the person that you identify with, isn't diminished, no matter what time span you're in.
Mm-hmm. This kind of reminds me, I was gonna say something about the lotus flower. Like it's so like the lotus flower grows in the mud, and it's not, right? Grows
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
mud,
yeah.
but then it blooms into something pure,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
beautiful. So it's not always gonna be pretty, but you're gonna be pretty if you
Afterwards.
afterwards,
Yeah, yeah.
it continue to bloom, guys. And I really hope this podcast helped you. And as I said before, Cuaderno is an open space. It's a notebook for us to reflect, share our experiences, and to relate to one another. Thank you so much, Ate KK. I know this is super out of your comfort zone. And I really appreciate it for making time and taking the time and sharing your experiencing to becoming vulnerable with me. Super, super thank you. I appreciate it.
No, thank you as well for sharing your platform and for allowing me to have this conversation with you. It's refreshing.
Oh, that's nice. Oh, I hope to visit you soon.
Yes, when the pandemic is over.
I know I have so much to talk about over tea and coffee.
I know. I know a nice place for coffee. I know a number two.
Oh, there's a lot of
Yeah.
places there. There's so many
Yeah.
places to go there, diba, ate?
Yeah, to go on hikes, and it's beautiful. It's called beautiful British Columbia. So it sticks to its tagline.
Yeah. Do you want any of our followers, not to follow you, or like anything coming up for you?
Not yet. I'm just working on something. I was telling Jilla earlier that I'm working on my little pandemic project I'm writing. So I let everyone know if it's there. I do have like an Instagram where I sometimes write. It's my personal account, so it's under Cats Closed. Or I have this thing called Letters from Pages, where I have little 6-word stories and little writing musings once in a while, but it's not as good as Jilla, so I'm still working on it.
No.
I'm still working on my perfectionism aspect, so I'm trying to cultivate self-compassion and just show up.
Oh, yeah, there we go. We're working on it. That's important.
I'm working on it. Yeah.
Yes. So thank you so much, guys, for watching and listening. I hope you guys follow at Ang Cuaderno, my YouTube channel. I'll put the links below, and we're also in Spotify. And yes, cheers to more future projects with Ate Kiki and everyone. So yay! Thank you, guys.